In an ancient Scottish castle, Ashlyn Grace unexpectedly becomes the photographer for a mysterious wedding. She not only experiences an embarrassing phone mishap, but also shares a dance with a charming stranger who seems to take an unusual interest in her. But most shockingly, she finds herself locked in a pantry, and it all might have something to do with her being called the mate of a werewolf. What makes Ashlyn a key figure in the werewolf family's story? How will she deal with this supernatural secret? Join our pack. Subscribe to start your adventure. 1 Miss Ashlyn Grace. A man in his early 50s approached me, wearing a pair of faded jeans, a checkered shirt, and a leather jacket to complete the outfit. His salt and pepper hair stood in all directions as if he had just woken up, but his blue eyes were smiling warmly. "Yes, that's me," I responded quickly, fidgeting with my coat and keeping a death grip on my suitcases. Not only do I despise wearing so many layers, but I also feel my throat tickle with a dry cough since the moment I got off the plane. Good." He grinned, his Scottish accent sounding foreign yet pleasant to the ear. "I'm here to take you to the wedding." Without warning, he grabbed my suitcases and wheeled them down the sidewalk towards a sleek black limousine parked across the street. With a humorous bow, he opened the door to the snazzy vehicle for me to get into. I blinked, wondering if my eyes were betraying me, or if this man maybe got his cars mixed up. My mother always warned me never to talk to strangers or get into strange cars. That's how they catch you and sell your body parts to witch doctors who use it to perform their weird hoodoo voodoo rituals. "Well, what are you waiting for?" The man's voice interrupted my thoughts. "Nothing to be afraid of, lass. It's only leather seats and fizzy juice in there." My eyes shifted from the limo to him, taking in his casual attire again. "You just don't look like the limousine type of driver to me." "Don't let the hair fool ya." He waved it off. "Now get in. We've only got an hour to get you there." That was the end of it. I made myself comfortable on the leather seats, relieved to be out of the cold and rain while the man loaded my cases in the trunk. After slipping behind the wheel, he turned in his seat to grab a glass to pour me a drink of champagne, muttering how they'll have his balls if they found out he didn't follow through with the instructions. "I didn't catch your name." I attempted conversation as he reached over me to place the glass in the cup holder. "Craig," he replied straightforwardly and waved his finger at the glass. "Now don't get too blootered before the wedding now here. I have a reputation to upkeep." I couldn't help but grin. If he was a kidnapper, at least he had a sense of humor. He started the limo with a light-hearted chuckle and cruised through the parking spaces, leaving the airport at our backs. As we drove through the breathtaking city of Glasgow, I checked my phone for any messages. There were 2 from my mother, 1 from Gran, 1 from the studio owner, no doubt to remind me to pay the rent, and none from Matt. I checked Mom's first. "Hi honey. How was your flight?" In the second one, she asked me about the weather. I quickly typed a reply. "Flight was long and stuffy. I hate small spaces. Weather is just like Aunt Izzy said, piss cold and wet." She sent me a laughing emoji and I could already imagine her cackling at my message. The 2 of us had a strange sense of humor. I hesitated whether I should ask her about Dad. The last conversation we had ended in an argument. That was yesterday, a few hours before I boarded my flight. He just couldn't accept that photography was the only thing I wanted to do with my life. For him, it was a means to an end with smartphone technology improving. And just like any other argument we had regarding my future, he compared me to my older sister. "Just look at Madison, she only has 1 year to go before getting her degree. That's what I call having a plan. You can't take pictures for a living, Ashlyn, you have to start putting down the lenses and see reality for what it is." However, I don't believe that's all reason why he's pissed at me for coming to Scotland. Apparently, my unexpected job offer here was just an excuse to ditch my upcoming engagement this weekend. Dad and Matt's father have been planning this for a few months now. If Matt and I were to get married, our father's law firms could merge, and Matt could someday take over the business. Matt's a great guy. We've been dating for almost a year now and things were great. I just don't think I'm ready for the next step yet. After checking my phone one last time, I slipped it into my coat and chose to focus on the scenery outside instead. Who knows when I might get the chance to see Scotland or any other country for that matter again. We drove past miles upon miles of dense woodlands. I pressed my face flush against the window, my breath fogging up the glass as I gawked at the outside world blurring past us. Behind the wheel, Craig was singing at the top of his lungs. I didn't know the song, but I swayed and tapped my feet along the rhythm. My breath caught in my throat when the next turn revealed a glittering lake below us, stretching too far for me to see where it ends. Craig continued singing heartily until he noticed my awestruck expression in the mirror. Yes, suppose I should introduce you to the scenes. If you look to your left, you'll see the Loch Lomond, not to be confused with the Loch Ness. And no, there's no such thing as the Loch Ness monster. That's what we like you to think anyway. Is it true the Balfour family lives in an actual castle? I recalled the wedding invitation they sent me a week ago. After typing in the location of the wedding into my browser, I was rendered speechless to find it was being held at a castle. True, Craig confirmed joyfully. It's been in the family for generations and soon to be passed down to the next Balfour. Just check in, you're not allergic to dogs, are ya? I shook my head. No, why? No reason. Loch Lomond disappeared from view at the next turn. Craig drove us through a small yet homey village. There was a corner cafe and right next to it a bookstore and souvenir shop. When I spotted a quaint little stationery store down the street, my eyes lit up. Those were my favorite. Lots and lots of pens and notebooks I'll never use. Dire fare, Craig said. You won't find it on any maps, cause it's not actually a real village. Before the fancy shops, it used to be where the first founder's servants lived. I like it better like this anyway. Now we have a pub. The drive lasted another 10 minutes before Craig announced that we have arrived. At first, I couldn't see anything except the hedge we drove along. But as soon as we reached the end, my thoughts were rendered blank at the mere sight of the castle. Situated beside a lake, it towered far above the ground. It must have been 1,000 years old, giving off an ancient feeling with withered stone walls and tiled roofs. And yet, nothing seemed to be falling apart. Craig parked the limo near the entrance and rushed to open the door for me. Only when I stepped outside did I realize how small I felt compared to the building. It blew my mind to think that someone lives here, someone calls this place their home. Besides Craig and the gardeners scurrying about with baskets full of flowers, there wasn't a single soul in sight. I almost believed this was a trick, that there wasn't a wedding after all, and I was the punchline to some very sick and expensive joke. But out of the blue, the rustic door of the castle creaked open, and a woman peered out. Thank God you're here. I watched her skip down the cement stairs with her white stilettos until she was standing before us. The woman, probably a few years older than me, glared at Craig. You're 10 minutes late. Seriously, Craig, did you stop at a pub on the way here or what? Yes, we did, didn't we, lass? He winked at me and ruffled his unruly hair. That was a blatant lie. But poking harmless fun seems to be part of his carefree personality. The woman rolled her eyes and locked her gaze on me. I'm Raina, and we're running behind schedule. Come on, she started leading the way back to the castle but paused briefly to look back. And go put your suit on, Craig, it's my wedding, not a night out with the lads. Unlike the ancient exterior of the castle, the inside was much more modern with Burma cream marble floors and Bavarian castle walls. Although everything was made of stone, it was surprisingly warm and toasty. I slipped my arms out of my coat, relieved to be wearing one less layer of stuffy clothing. Raina led me through a massive living room with a large blazing hearth at the far end. The sofas and love seats were all white with red and gray cushions scattered about for decoration. An old vinyl was playing soothing background music to fill the silence. My eyes locked on the painting above the hearth, briefly making out the shapes of large dog-like creatures before hurrying off to catch up with Raina. The bride-to-be ascended a set of wide wooden stairs that led to a long hallway with about 5 rustic mahogany doors on each side. First door on your right is a bathroom, she pointed out as she moved. Word of warning, don't freak out if you find Craig passed out on the loo after the wedding. Noted, I nodded. First door on your left is a closet, in case you need more blankets or towels during your stay here. I already take it you're not used to the cold, she winked, eyeing my coat amusingly. I couldn't agree more, the winters back home are cold, but this is just crazy. Raina snorted and picked up her pace until she reached the end of the hallway. She opened the door to the left and gestured for me to go in. This is your room for the evening, the ensuite bathroom is right through the door on your right, and the mini fridge is stocked with ciders and water. Help yourself. I breathed a laugh of astonishment at the sight of the room. It was bigger than my apartment back home with a queen-sized bed, 2 floor-to-ceiling windows with a magnificent view of the gardens and lake, and a cozy sitting corner with a desk where I could set up my temporary office. The wooden floor was covered with a thick, checkered carpet that matched the soft beige covers on the bed, And on the wall above the desk hung another painting of a pack of wolves huddled together in the snow. "After you're settled in, just ask Craig and he'll escort you to my room," Raina said and checked her wristwatch. "Just don't take too long, though. We should start getting ready in half an hour and I'm already worried about running late." "I'll be ready in a jiffy," I assured her. "Good." She turned to leave but paused at the door. "Oh, and Ashlyn, thank you for coming on such short notice. You have no idea how much this wedding means to me and everyone's families, too." I found Craig in the living room downstairs after spending an hour photographing Raina in the process of getting ready. He was struggling with his tie, cursing when his fingers got stuck in the knot. "Here," I offered, placing my camera on the nearest surface to help him out. "Ta," he grinned and straightened up. "Didn't take you for a lass that knows how to tie one of these." "My gran taught me how," I recalled as my fingers worked the knot. "Most of the things I can do today is all thanks to her." When I was satisfied with my handiwork, I gave him a light pat against the chest and retrieved my camera. Craig turned towards a mirror and seemed genuinely satisfied with the result. He almost looked younger, all dressed up in a dark gray suit with the checkered red tie standing out against a crisp white shirt. His hair was still disheveled though. I was told to head down to the chapel to await the bride, but this place is so big I already forgot Raina's instructions on how to get there. "Allow me to escort ya, lady." He linked our arms with a jubilant smile and led the way. We strolled through a well-lit corridor with crystal chandeliers dangling from the ceiling. I couldn't help but admire the paintings on the walls. Instead of pictures of wolves and dog-like creatures, I was met by the faces of men and women. Just like the castle, the paintings were ancient and stunning. I had to give it to the artist, they had an eye for detail. It was almost hard to imagine the people in the pictures weren't alive. "The Balfours of the past," Craig spoke out of the blue and pointed at the first portrait on the left. "Right here is the bastard who started it all, Craven with many middle names Balfour. 'Tis piece of land and castle are both named after him, Craven Pride. He got married, had a bunch of children, and passed on his legacy to that Egypt in the second picture, Alistair middle name Balfour." I followed to where he pointed, noticing the man in the second portrait resembled the first. Had some more children, happily died of old age, and left his son Barclay his great fortune. He continued, "After Barclay came Calder. He was a bit of a fixer-upper emotionally speakin'. We didn't think he would ever marry, but then he met his bonny lass and next thing we know kids." He clapped for emphasis. "After Calder came Cormac, after him Donal lovely lad, after him Graham who only had one son Lachlan, who married a lass from Wales and had Ramsay Balfour. And do you know who came after Ramsay?" I hauled up my shoulders and shook my head. "Well," he pointed from Ramsay's portrait to the last one in the hallway. "He married his lovely Celine and 9 months later, out came Emmerich many names Balfour, the very person whose son's gettin' married today." "And where do you fit in?" I asked, curious about the Balfour history. Craig looked at me as if I just asked him the stupidest question in the world. "I'm here for the wine, o' course." He chuckled and picked up his pace. "Come on, we'll be late." With my camera in hand, I followed him outside through the gardens and flower beds, and all the way down to the lake where the chapel awaited. A part of me expected to find an old rustic building with moss-covered walls and faded stained glass windows. I could hardly keep my jaw from hitting the ground when I saw where the ceremony would take place. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Craig spoke behind me. "'Tis used to be an old shed where they kept the shovels and things. It burned down in a fire years ago, but somehow the original foundation and structures survived. Next thing we know, plants started to grow all over the place and 'tis is what we were left with." I craned my neck and followed the vines and ivy up the stone columns to where they met at the wooden beams at the top and cascaded downward. A trail of white rose petals led the way to the altar where a vicar waited in his white mantle. 3 bridesmaids stood on the vicar's right and 2 groomsmen on his left. The guests were all seated on wooden benches on either side of the petal trail, all patiently anticipating the bride's arrival. Craig hurried towards his seat near the front, leaving me to wonder where I should stand for when Raina arrives. "All rise for the bride." My heart nearly jumped through my ribcage when the vicar's voice sounded above the murmuring of the crowd. Like one man, the guests rose to their feet and turned towards the back of the chapel. I ducked to the right before anyone could see me and hurried towards the front. Luckily, I took my place a few feet behind the groomsmen just as the bagpipes began their wedding march. Uttering a breath of relief, I readied my camera to capture the ceremony. Time briefly slowed down as Raina appeared at the start of the aisle. Although I've seen her in her dress before, she still took my breath away in the mystic, late afternoon light. She had an ethereal beauty about her, something almost inhuman to the naked eye. I figured it was just her bridal glow or the rays of sun that poured through the vines and ivy. Or perhaps some people are just blessed with good genes and natural beauty. Rotating my angle, I focused the camera on the groom to catch his reaction to his bride in that moment. Of all the weddings I've photographed, this is always my favorite shot. The way the groom smiled uncontrollably while wiping a tear from his eye made me wonder if Matt will have a similar reaction on our wedding someday. Hell knows, he doesn't even cry during movies. Maybe it's a lawyer thing. Once Raina was handed over to her fiancé, the guests all took their seats. My feet were rooted behind the groomsmen as I took one picture after the other, switching between filters and different contrasts for variety. A deathly silence ruled before the vicar began. Dearly beloveds, we are gathered here today in the presence of God to join together this man and woman in holy matrimony, and therefore. A loud buzz interrupted his speech before Beyoncé's Single Ladies started playing from my jeans pocket. My stomach dropped when all heads turned towards me. Oh crap! I clutched my camera to my chest with one hand while the other one delved into my pocket in search of my phone. I'm so sorry, Shit. Just as I had the phone in my grasp, it slipped through my fingers and dropped to the floor. Somewhere in the crowd someone snorted. I'm pretty sure it was Craig. I dropped to my knees to retrieve my phone, which was still ringing. However, a masculine hand scooped it up first and held it towards me. Thank you, I breathed and immediately turned it off. No problem. That voice alone is enough to send my stomach twirling. I looked up to see a man standing in front of me and I swear I felt my last train of thought disappear. Time was nothing but a concept when our eyes met as I became overwhelmed with emotions that made no sense. It was like recalling a memory of someone I never met, and yet everything about him felt familiar. There wasn't time to admire his other features before he returned to his spot at the front of the groomsmen, leaving me red-faced and with his memory burned into my head. To proceed, the vicar cleared his throat before continuing where he left off. We are gathered here today in the presence of God to join together this man and woman in holy matrimony, and therefore. I tried my best to focus on the rest of the ceremony while taking a few pictures here and there, but nothing I did could stop me from stealing glances at the man and picturing those eyes staring right through me. The strange thing was, every time I found my gaze wandering back to him, his were already fixed on me. The guests were all gathered in the dance hall after the ceremony. Raina and her husband Alexander were seated at their own table at the far end of the room while waiters strode in and out with trays of food and drink balancing on their hands. While the newlywed couple and their guests enjoyed dinner, I wandered off to take some pictures of the decorations near the entrance. The dance hall itself was beautifully decorated. Champagne-colored drapes and twinkling fairy lights adorned the ceiling, hand-carved pedestals perched underneath each window, each decorated with a crystal vase containing a bouquet of white and peach-colored roses. White and gold tablecloths covered the tables, and the crystal glasses alone were enough to afford an entire year's rent on my apartment. After the incident at the chapel with my phone ringing and me barely surviving the first-hand embarrassment, I tried keeping it low-key and avoided as much eye contact with the guests as possible. But even with my back turned on them, I had a strange feeling I was being watched. Acting casually, I appeared to be photographing the deer skull on the wall near the entrance with the gold-painted antlers. However, after the third shot, my camera's screen faded before switching off. Shoot! I muttered to myself and felt around my pockets for the spare batteries. My fingers brushed against several cylinder-shaped objects, but in the process of retrieving them, my hand caught on the inside of my pocket. I cursed under my breath as the batteries, among other things, dropped to the floor, clattering against the marble tiles. My first instinct was to drop to my knees to stop them from rolling too far, but someone beat me to it. I watched dumbfoundedly as the very same man from earlier crouched before me, picking up the objects one by one before rising to his full height to meet my eyes. He's a full head taller than me, and his gaze alone was enough to give me a fever. I think you dropped this, he stated and dangled the batteries in front of my face. Yes, thank you. I completely forgot to change the batteries after the ceremony, and this as well. My words caught in my throat when I saw what he had in his other hand. A very obvious cylinder-shaped feminine object. A tampon. Shit. His mouth corner twitched up, betraying his amusement. My heart nearly broke through my ribcage when he slipped the little object into my pocket, the heat of his fingers seeping through my jeans and into my skin. Best not to let anyone else see. He leaned down to whisper in my ear. No doubt my face is beet red, if not redder. How much bad luck can one person have? First my phone ringing during the ceremony and now this. But no matter how much I'd like to die of embarrassment that moment, my eyelids still fluttered at the smell of his cologne and his warm breath fanning against my neck. Just as I regained the ability to think straight, he stepped back and casually made his way back to the guests as if nothing ever happened. My eyes traveled across the length of his back and legs, appreciating how that suit clung to all the right places, how broad his shoulders were, how soft his hair looked. I blinked when realizing that I am shamelessly checking him out, and mentally scolded myself. This was wrong. I'm dating Matt and we're happy. We make a good team. My inner conflict came to an end when the maid of honor stepped onto the raised platform where the orchestra was playing. She tapped the microphone a few times to get everyone's attention. Realizing the toasts and speeches were about to begin, I crossed the room to crouch between the stage and the head table where Raina and her husband were seated. With my back turned on them and the guests, I readied my camera and waited for the first toast to begin. Hi everyone, I'm Astrid, sister of the bride for those of you who don't know. She started and shyly tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Most of you already know when confidence and leadership were handed out, Raina happened to be first in line. I managed to capture the smile on Raina's face at her sister's opening line. And I'm not going to lie, I almost thought her confidence would be the reason why she'll never find love. But she proved me wrong. Because there you are, married with the most amazing guy in the world and ready to start your new life together. Astrid raised her glass. The first toast goes to Raina and Alexander. May your love and friendship last until the great hunt ends. Until the great hunt ends. The guests repeated before taking the first drink. And to relieve me of the spotlight, would the brother of the groom please come forward? She asked after everyone settled down. A chair slid out somewhere behind me and Astrid beckoned someone towards the stage with her glass. Ladies and gents, I give you Rian Balfour. I snapped one last picture of Astrid descending the stage before the brother of the groom took her place. My eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when I saw who this Rian was. What are the chances? That guy. Isn't Raina looking absolutely stunning tonight? He gestured at Raina, who rose to her feet and struck a pose in her wedding dress. Not only is she lovely but she's also smart and spontaneous and deserves one hell of a husband. Thankfully for Alexander, she agreed to marry him before she found one. The guests cracked up and I snapped the perfect picture of Alexander covering his face with his hands and Raina laughing hysterically beside him. But on a more serious note, I don't think their relationship was a coincidence, he continued, and all of a sudden, his eyes were on me. Sometimes all it takes is one look for you to know this is it. This is the person I've been searching for my whole life. And every moment was worth it. The wait, the mistakes I've made on the way. The mornings I woke up thinking I'll never find someone like her. Everything. The room has fallen deathly quiet during his speech. I couldn't move from my spot on the floor while his eyes held mine. The way he was staring at me was so intense. I swear if it wasn't for the chill in the air, I'd melt into a puddle. But some of the guests were beginning to follow his gaze and were looking right at me. I swallowed dryly, begging him internally to just get this over with so I could retreat to the back of the room. As if he could hear my thoughts, he tore his eyes from me and continued. And that's exactly how I would sum up Alex's miserable past 28 years before he met Raina. She has ended his search for love, and we couldn't be happier to celebrate this day with them. To Raina and Alex, may your love and friendship last until the great hunt ends. Until the great hunt ends. The guests repeated and took another drink. Rian held my gaze as he descended the stage, only breaking it when he strode past me. I felt lightheaded after what just happened and couldn't be more grateful when the bride and groom were called to open the dance floor. Taking a seat at the bottom of the stairs at the entrance, I observed their dance from a distance, snapping pictures whenever they shared a kiss or a smile. Raina made a beautiful bride. She looked truly happy as well. Because she gets to marry someone she chose, a little voice in my head told me. Immediately I felt guilty about that thought. Matt's not that bad, I argued to myself. I could definitely see myself getting married to him someday, start a family, and grow old together. Not just yet though. I only recently turned 22. I have my whole life ahead of me to travel the world, And the last thing I want now is to settle down and play house. That's what my father couldn't understand. And speaking of Matt, he still hasn't called or texted me yet. There wasn't time to wallow in my disappointment. The next thing I knew, the band began playing an upbeat song and the rest of the guests joined the bride and groom on the dance floor. I managed to snap a few pictures of Craig dancing with 3 different women, all 3 half his age. When the first woman finally caught him dancing with someone else, she drenched his face with her martini and stomped off. Craig only chortled, licked the alcohol off his lips, and continued dancing on his own. Next up was a song to slow dance to. As I focused the camera on another dancing couple, I heard someone clear their throat at my back. The first thing I noticed was the intensity of Ryan's eyes before noticing his outstretched hand. May I have this dance? I looked at him like he was joking. I'm working actually. They won't mind. He gestured at Raina and Alexander slow dancing, lost in their own little world. My thoughts were blank, causing me to struggle to find words to say. They. Now. His mouth corners twitched upwards. If you think you have enough pictures of Craig's terrible dancing, then yes, now would be perfect. I was still gaping like a fish when my camera was pried from my hands and replaced with his. My feet were on autopilot, following Ryan onto the dance floor and through the guests. Finally, he stopped and placed a hand on my waist, pulling me flush against him. We were chest to chest, so close I could smell the champagne on his lips and count the tiny flecks of green in his eyes. Every part of me his hands touched left a burning trail in its wake, making me feel like I've plummeted into a fever that can't be broken. The strange thing was I didn't mind his hands on me. In fact, I wanted him to touch me, explore every inch of my body until all I could do was melt underneath his fingers. It wasn't until those thoughts scared me back to reality that I noticed some of the guests were staring. I realized what this must look like to them: an ordinary photographer, who's supposed to be working, dancing with a respectable duke. For all I knew, I should be addressing him as my lord or something. Before he could predict my next move, I broke out of his hold and weaved my way through the dancing people, hoping he wasn't fast enough to follow. I grabbed my camera and ran from the wedding, sprinting down the halls of the castle and not once slowing down until I reached my room. Until all I could hear from the dance hall was the distant laughs of the guests. 4. Knock, knock, knock. I awoke with a start when the knocking chased off one of the most vivid dreams I ever had. My heart hammers against my chest as I briefly recall the details, feeling heat spread through my entire being. It felt so real: his hands on me, the smell of his cologne, the taste of his lips. Despite the thrilling anticipation the fever dream left me in, I haven't even gotten to the plot twist yet. I wasn't dreaming about Matt. Matt doesn't have dark hair and striking blue eyes. And I've never dreamt of Matt pinning me down on anything before, which means I've got a problem in both my subconscious and behind the door. Ashlyn, you awake yet? Raina's voice was muffled on the other side of the room, but I could clearly tell it was her. My heart nearly missed 10 beats when I vaguely recalled leaving the wedding before she could even toss the bouquet. All because I freaked out after dancing with the Duke. Ashlyn? Raina asked again. My eyes landed on the chair I placed underneath the door handle last night. Again I felt like cringing, thinking how childish that was. As if Ryan would follow me to my room and try sneaking in. Coming, I said loud enough for her to hear and hurried over to the door to remove the chair. Raina's face lit up in a gentle smile when I opened the door on a crack. Hey. Hi. May I come in? Having no idea what to say, I only nodded and stepped aside. Raina closed the door behind her and joined me on the bed. Only then did I notice the 2 mugs of coffee in her hand. She handed me one and crossed her legs underneath her. I hope it's all right. I'm not sure how you take your coffee. I'm not picky. I managed to smile and wrapped both my hands around the mug. The warmth soothed my cold fingers. It made me miss the sun back home. What happened last night? She asked the question I've been dreading since I heard her knock. You left so quick. I almost thought something was chasing you. Her brows rose slightly and she added, I'm not mad though, just curious. Please don't tell me one of the guests were being a prick to you. I nearly choked on my coffee and shook my head fervently. What? No, not at all. I can't even remember why I left. It was unprofessional anyway. I'd understand if you'd want a discount. Raina wiped her lipstick from the mug's rim and smacked her lips, waving it off. Of course I'm paying you in full. I was just worried about you. After I saw you dancing with Ryan, I couldn't be happier you were having fun. Work hard, play hard, you know. But then you ran off and the first thing I thought was that he perhaps said something offensive. He didn't. I cut her off almost too abruptly. Raina looked at me with arched brows, waiting for an explanation. I mean, he was very polite. And he didn't say much either. I guess I just wasn't feeling well. I started to feel lightheaded. Got these weird hot flushes while we danced. I thought I was coming down with a fever, so I left. However, after blabbering excuses as to why I ran from the wedding like Cinderella from the ball, I realized Raina was looking at me as if she's just seen a ghost. She even turned paler than she already was. I opened my mouth to ask if she's feeling all right. But before I could even utter a word, she grabbed the empty mug from my hands and marched for the door. I've got to go. Wait, where? She closed the door before I could finish the sentence. I slumped back against the headboard and huffed. What a strange family, Craig with his contagious optimism, Raina and the way she just upped and left, and Rian with his whole mysterious persona and those burning eyes. Shaking it off, I got up to get dressed and to make the bed. The chances of ever seeing them again were small, close to zero. Soon I'll be home and with Matt. We'll go on a date and he's going to tell me about his past 2 days at work and I'm going to tell him all about my short time in Scotland. The stairs creaked and complained as I struggled my way down with one suitcase in hand while wheeling the other behind me. Shit, I cursed when my foot missed a step, nearly sending me tumbling headfirst down the rest. Need some help there, lass. I blew the hair from my face to see Craig standing at the bottom, amused by the looks of me struggling. Please, I breathed and was more than happy to hand him one case. We walked side by side down the hall and stopped in the lobby. I was surprised to be met by a small crowd of people awaiting my arrival. Raina had her arm linked with Alexander's, the latter nodding his head at me in greeting, and the last person I recognized as Astrid, Raina's sister. We wanted to say goodbye, Raina explained with a warm smile. And to thank you, Alexander added, for flying over here on such short notice. Thanks to you, we'll have some wedding pictures to show the kids someday. I smiled. It should be me thanking you. I got to see Scotland for the first time, even if it was just for 1 day. Raina muttered an before embracing me in a hug. I could almost not believe how warm she was with the chill in the air. She barely wore more than 2 layers and yet she's radiating heat. I know we only just met, but I'm going to miss you, she said and pulled back. At least stay for one last coffee. I wish I could, I pouted, but my flight leaves in 1 hour and it takes about that long to get to the airport. She blinked. 1 hour. I nodded. Yep. Raina looked from me to Alexander. They seemed to have a silent conversation before she bit down on her bottom lip. At last she turned to me and said, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask what she meant, only for Craig to sweep me off my feet and throw me over his shoulder. I shrieked and thrashed in his grip. What the hell? Put me down. Sorry, lass, he said as he walked with me down the hall. 'Tis is for your own good. What? That doesn't make any sense at all. I just about yelled and hammered my fists against his back, although that only made him snort. I swear, Craig, if you don't put me down this instant, I shrieked once again when he lowered me to the floor in a swift movement, leaving me lightheaded while the blood rushed from my brain to the rest of my body. My eyes darted about. I was in a small room with shelves. There were jars and packages and truckles of cheese. A pantry. Before I could wonder why I was in a pantry, Craig had backed out and closed the door behind him, locking it for good measure. My heart dropped to my stomach. No. I threw myself against the door and yanked on the handle. Let me out. I don't care if you're dukes and duchesses. Kidnapping and hostage-keeping are punishable by law. I should know, my dad's a lawyer. It's just until your flight leaves, lass. Craig's voice sounded from the other side of the wooden door. Let me out or I'll sue all your asses. I gritted on my teeth and rammed into the door with my shoulder, instantly regretting it when a sharp pain shot through my arm and shoulder blade. Ow, shit. My mind was racing 1,000,000 miles per hour, asking the same questions over and over. Why did they lock me in a pantry? Why should I miss my flight? Why are they keeping me hostage? Mom was right, never get into cars with strange men. Not even when they have a good sense of humor, or if the car happens to be a snazzy limousine. This just proved that even royals can't be trusted. They're going to keep me for my limbs to use in their weird rituals and no one will ever know what happened to me. During my inner panic, I picked up on their hushed voices on the other side of the door. In a flash, I had my ear pressed to the wood and tried making out as much of the conversation as I could. We can't let her leave, Raina stressed. It's her, I'm sure of it. Are you absolutely sure, Ray? Astrid squeaked. Yes, the way she described it, that's how it feels. I should know. And how do you suppose we explain to her why we're keeping her locked in a pantry, lassie? Craig voiced his concern, not even bothering to whisper. We can't keep her there forever, even I know that. We can't let her leave either, Alexander stated. It will break him. I will not sit by and watch him hurt again. A short silence followed until Raina spoke again. I watched him talk to her last night. I've known him for 10 years now, and that was the first time I ever saw him truly smile. Craig hummed sagely. What else can you expect, lass? If what you say is true, then after all these years he's finally found his mate. After that I stopped listening. My knees suddenly felt weak as I slid to the floor while my heart was barely beating. However, I managed to catch Alexander's last words. How do you think Rian would react if he found out we locked his mate in the pantry? 5. It's been 1 hour and 47 minutes. I'm still locked in the pantry and the chances of survival were dwindling. There wasn't much to snack on while I was being kept hostage, but after taking inventory of the shelves, I came upon a box of chocolate cereal. Usually, I would ask before I'd help myself to other people's food, but these Scots locked me up without anything to eat or drink. I'm way past formalities by now. I popped a few pops into my mouth, listening to them crunch while checking my phone. Still no signal. It wouldn't surprise me if this pantry was built to serve as a safety bunker during a war or an apocalypse. It would have made my time as a hostage so much more endurable if I could at least watch some YouTube. At that moment I picked up the soft hums of voices approaching. After listening closely, I recognized one of them as Raina's and another as Craig's. There were 3 I couldn't place and one I couldn't hear that well. The latter, however, raised a pitch when the person spoke. What do you mean she's here? That voice. My heart dropped when I immediately recognized it as Rian's. An inaudible reply followed. You locked her in the pantry. Panicked, okay. Raina whisper shouted. Would you have had a better idea? Maybe not lock her up like we're a bunch of deranged lunatics. An unfamiliar voice snorted. Have you seen yourself during the last full moon? I heard a sigh before Raina said. At least she missed her flight. I think we can let her out now. I'll do it. Hopefully she won't try to kill me since I'm not the one who locked her up. I straightened up when I heard the key turn in the lock. The door handle wiggled before it opened on a crack. Rian cautiously peered in, blinking in what could only be surprise when he spotted me sitting on a sack of potatoes while munching on chocolate cereal. His mouth corner twitched up. I've come to free you from my sister-in-law's crazy schemes, and at the same time to apologize for last night. I remained silent and he took that as a safe sign to enter the pantry. I know we haven't officially met, and I assume that's what sent you running off last night. Completely my fault. I'm often told I'm a bit straightforward. But let's talk outside where it smells less of cheese. Here, let me help you up. Just as he took another step towards me, I chucked the cereal box at him and hit him square in the face. In a flash, I had a can of soup in my grasp and tossed that at him as well. Rian raised his hands as one object after the other lunged at him, trying to block my assaults as best he could. Hold on. Now wait. Let me explain. He tried getting me to stop but proved to be futile since I had unlimited ammo. I chucked a box of pasta at him. Locked me. A bag of chips followed. In a pantry. With no damn reception. And I'm sorry. He dodged another can of soup by inches before it could hit his face. You have to understand this isn't my fault. I had no idea you were here until. His eyes grew twice their size when I aimed a bag of flour at him. No. I squinted at him. No. You locked me in a pantry. I seethed before launching the flour at him. Rian screwed his eyes shut and scrunched his face when a cloud of white exploded at his feet, covering him in flour from head to toe. He exhaled sharply from his nose, sending wafts of white puffs swirling. He looked like a corpse that escaped the morgue. I tried fighting against the smile tugging at my lips, but the moment he opened his eyes to look at me, I lost it. My hand clamped over my mouth to muffle the giggles, but even that couldn't betray my obvious amusement. Rian rolled his eyes but at least managed a tiny smile of his own, happy now. Oh yes, I nodded and wiped my hands on my pants. I can say I've thrown a duke with flour and ruined his suit and lived to tell the tale. He breathed a laugh and gestured at the door. Does that mean you're ready to talk now? I was more than ready. It's time to find out why they took me hostage. Rian opened the door for me and I brushed past him. The first thing I saw as I entered the kitchen was 5 people staring at me in surprise. There was Raina, Craig, Alexander, and a young girl, an older woman I didn't recognize. Their expressions changed from surprise to absolute astonishment when Ryan appeared behind me, all covered in flour from head to toe. Craig snorted and gave him a hearty pat on the shoulder. "All right there, lad. You lookin' a wee bit peely-wally this mornin'." The Duke of Flour glowered at the older man and ruffled his fingers through his once dark hair, causing more flour to fall from his tresses. However, I didn't find it funny anymore. These people locked me up and now I miss my flight. How was I supposed to explain to my parents and Matt why I won't be coming home today? My father will have a fit, probably blame it on my lack of responsibility or claim that I'm running from my upcoming engagement. With that in mind and fueling my anger from the start, I turned to look at Raina, demanding an explanation. She scrunched her face and awkwardly asked, "By the way she's looking at ya, lassie, I'd say she wants something stronger," Craig stated and opened the cabinet underneath the sink, retrieving a bottle of whiskey. "Like I always say, alcohol doesn't solve your problems, but then neither does milk." He poured a glass and slid it towards me. However, Ryan caught it halfway across the countertop and sent it back, shaking his head at me. "Don't drink that." Craig only shrugged and downed the glass himself. Raina huffed and raked her fingers through her hair. "Screw it, I don't know how to explain any of this. This is supposed to be your job." She looked at Ryan almost accusingly. "I did you a favor keeping her here. Now the rest is up to you. Alexander and I haven't even consummated our marriage yet. So good luck, we'll be in our room." Everyone watched her grasp Alexander's hand in hers before marching out. The kitchen was relatively quieter without Raina, but silence won't answer my questions. So, I turned to Ryan with the same demanding expression. He visibly cringed before his eyes flickered to the other 2 women in the room. "This is my mother Rika and little sister Clemmy, by the way. Don't worry, I'll introduce you to the rest later." "Introduce me to the rest?" I raised my hands to shut him up. "Why is that even necessary?" "Because, we're." He can't seem to get past stuttering only singular words at a time. Rika snickered and placed her hand on his back. I haven't seen him at such a loss of words since I told him I was pregnant with Clemmy. He was 16 at the time. She gave Ryan a shove towards the door. "Why don't you and Craig head down to Dyerfair for milk? We're all out after the wedding." Before Ryan could protest, Craig ushered him out of the kitchen, leaving me with Rika and Clemmy. The latter has been staring at me since I emerged from the pantry. I sent her an awkward wave and she quickly averted her eyes. "And he's gone. Good." Rika had me by the arms and backed me up until my legs bumped into a chair. "You might want to sit down for this. Clemmy, fetch some water with sugar." The younger girl moved at the speed of light. I don't believe I actually saw her retrieve a glass and fill it up, but the next thing I knew, she's back. She handed her mother the glass and Rika shoved it into my hands and made herself comfortable on the chair opposite of me. Clemmy remained standing behind her mother. "I'm going to keep this short and sweet, dear," Rika started, looking me dead in the eye. "We don't usually go around telling humans like yourself about our kind, but considering you're my son's mate, I feel I should be straightforward about this." "Excuse me, what now?" I blinked, shifting my eyes between the 2 women. "They're kind. Mate." Rika glanced up at Clemmy, inhaling slowly before saying, "We're werewolves, dear." Silence filled the kitchen as her words hung in the air between us. I broke that silence when I snorted and uttered a laugh. "Ha, funny." "No, really," Clemmy said softly and fiddled with the ends of her dark braids. Werewolves are real. We're just very good at hiding and blending in." I shook my head. What do they take me for, an idiot? I didn't have the time nor patience for whatever this was. If this was their idea of a joke or an excuse for why they locked me up, then they've clearly mistaken their humor for bullshit. In a beat, I slid the chair out and advanced towards the door. "Where are you going?" Clemmy called after me. "To the airport. Maybe I can still catch a flight home before my family thinks I'm kidnapped or worse, running from my responsibilities." I heard Rika mutter something to her daughter but couldn't care less. "I'm getting out of here one way or another." My freedom was in sight when I reached the lobby and front door. But my fingers barely grazed the handle before a bone-chilling growl sounded behind me. I froze as the hairs on my arms and neck stood on end. "We were telling the truth, dear," Rika's voice echoed all the way from the kitchen. "Turn around and see for yourself. Don't worry, Clemmy doesn't bite." My heart hammered in my throat and my next breath came out trembling. Slowly, I turned around and felt my blood run cold at what I saw. In the middle of the lobby was a wolf, the biggest one I ever saw. Its gray eyes were trained on me. I reached back for the door handle without tearing my eyes from it, but the wolf uttered another growl, and I quickly retracted my hand. What do? I searched my memory for any survival tips I might have picked up on Animal Planet whenever encountering a wolf. If it's brown, lie down; if it's black, fight back; if it's white, good night. No, that's for bears. And even if I did have the courage to fight back, this wolf could tear my arm off with one bite, judging by its size and jaws. But then something even more terrifying happened. Before my very eyes, the wolf shrunk into itself. The fur disappeared along with the ears and tail, and a few sickening cracks later, Clemmy stood in its place as bare as the day she was born. What the hell? That was my last thought before my vision turned fuzzy and I felt my legs go limp. I fainted before my head even hit the ground. 6. The pitter-patter of rain woke me up. Cracking open one eye, I observed the downpour outside the window. Opening both eyes, I studied my surroundings. I'm in my room. Well, not my room, but the room I was assigned to in the castle. Someone had the decency to carry me up the stairs and even tucked me into bed. As that thought crossed my mind, my heart missed a beat. In one move, I yanked the covers off myself and uttered a breath of relief. I was still in the same clothes as earlier. My whole body stiffened when flashes of what happened in the lobby came dawning on me. I was on my way out when that wolf appeared out of nowhere and turned into Clemmy right before my eyes. That couldn't be real, right? It's impossible. Raina must have spiked my coffee this morning. Or maybe the chocolate cereal has gone bad, because I had no other way of explaining it. I had to be hallucinating. For knocks at the door jolted me back to reality. My head jerked towards the door, but nothing else moved. Common sense told me if I kept still and held my breath, then whoever's on the other side will believe I'm still asleep and will eventually leave. Ashlyn. Shit, that's Rian's voice. Keep still, don't breathe. Ashlyn, I know you're awake. I can hear your heartbeat. Common sense told me it's impossible for a human to hear another person's heart beating from so far away. But then again, I did see a wolf turn into a teenage girl. Who was I to say what is impossible? Cringing, I hit my head against the headboard. How bad can one person's luck get? I'm coming in, please don't throw something at me again. I watched the door handle jiggle with an upheld breath and shrunk back into the covers when Rian entered the room. There was not a single trace of evidence that he's been covered with flour a few hours ago. He wore a clean suit, and his hair was back to its original dark brown color. Was it wrong for me to think he's handsome after being locked in a pantry, and only recently finding out werewolves are real? Our eyes met, and for a split second, I imagined him running his hands down my sides and legs, setting my skin ablaze everywhere he touched. I forced myself out of that fantasy when he sat at the edge of the bed near my feet. In his eyes I could see a storm raging. It reminded me of the story of Atlas, the Greek titan who was condemned to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders for eternity. Whatever Rian had on his mind weighed more than the world. I'm sorry you had to find out this way about us, he finally said. It took me a second or two to realize he was referring to Clemmy being a wolf. Or was it a wolf being Clemmy? Am I sure it was even a wolf at all? I shook my head to rid it of those thoughts. Hell, I was already questioning everything I know. Just be honest with me. I clutched the blanket to my chest as if it had the power to keep me safe. Was that real? Did Clemmy? I couldn't even say it out loud. It was too absurd. He nodded. I still find it hard to believe. He exhaled sharply and rose to his feet, towering above me. Then tell me how this is fake. Before I could even mentally prepare myself for the worst, his face crawled and altered. I felt the color drain from my face when he tilted his head upwards to look at me. The white behind his striking blue eyes has turned completely black. His brows were arched unnaturally high, pushing inward to create a deep, menacing frown on his once perfect face. Thin black veins branched from his eyes down his cheeks, and through his parted lips I could see a pair of inch-long fangs gleaming. Rian turned his head from side to side, allowing me more glimpses of the sideburns protruding from his jaw and the sharp tips of his ears. Honestly, I expected worse, like some demonic creature with several rows of sharp teeth, 3 sets of horns, and a hideously deformed face. I guess watching the Underworld series with Madison gave me false expectations. But hey, back then I didn't know werewolves actually existed. Rian remained in that form for about 3 seconds before his face returned to normal. His brows knitted together as he studied me. That didn't scare you. Scare me? I nearly choked. Not in the least. Freaked me out a bit, yeah. That's not normal, Rian. You need to see someone about that, a doctor or a vet. I laughed hysterically, and I need to see a therapist. I'm finally losing it. You're in shock, I understand that. He tried keeping his voice even. Then I take it you'll also understand that I have no freaking clue what all of this has to do with me. They locked me in a pantry so I could miss my flight, and then I overhear them saying some weird shit about me being your mate. I raked my fingers through my hair in complete frustration. Can you explain that to me? Instantly, the storm returned to his eyes. Rian turned towards the window, observing the rain pattering against the glass with his hands clasped behind his back. When a werewolf turns 18, they're bound to find their mate sooner or later, he started. What makes it different than human relationships is we only have one mate. Some find theirs in a matter of weeks or a year, some never do. It's an instinct that kicks in the moment you lay eyes on each other. He didn't meet my eyes as he sat at my feet again. And when I saw you at the wedding for the first time, I just knew. Every cell and atom in me felt it, and it's all I've been thinking of since. I pulled my knees to my chest while allowing everything he just said to sink in. I'm not going to deny it, I felt something when I first caught a glimpse of his eyes when my phone so unceremoniously rang during the wedding. It was like my senses had a mind of their own, seeking him out among the guests and those darn hot flushes I got when he touched me. So what now? I managed to string a few words together. Does being your mate have any T's and C's I should know of? He seemed relieved for some reason, perhaps for the fact I wasn't screaming or throwing stuff at him. Well, you definitely can't leave. I shot upright quicker than one can say. Werewolf. What do you mean I can't leave? I have to get back to my family. I have responsibilities. I'm getting engaged. To Matt. My jaw nearly dropped to the floor. How on earth did he know that? As if reading my mind, he gestured at my phone on the bedside table. He left you about 100 voicemails. Really, Ash? Him? You can do better. And I assume you're referring to yourself. I immediately jumped to defense. Because locking girls in pantries is a real panty dropper. And we're back on that, he sighed. I don't think you understand how serious this is. I swung my legs over the bed and started pacing. My parents won't take lightly to me randomly deciding to stay in Scotland. My father already believes I have zero regards for responsibilities, and besides, I only have one set of clothes in my suitcase. Newsflash, I didn't actually plan on staying more than one night, and I sucked in a sharp breath when out of the blue, he wrapped an arm around my waist and pulled me flush against him. His other hand was covering my mouth, muffling everything I still wanted to say. A silence. Delightful. A smile tugged at his lips at my annoyed expression. And now that I have your undivided attention, here's what's going to happen. A little birdie told me your business is struggling, you're behind on your studio's rent, and you're only marrying this Matt lad because your father expects you to. My brows nearly shot through the roof. How the hell did he know that? I have my sources. He shrugged as if reading my thoughts through my expression. So, I came up with a proposition for your benefit, of course. Direfair's travel agency is looking for a photographer to take a few pictures of the local sites and hotspots for their new brochure. They're paying generously, enough to afford 4 months studio rent. Just say you'll stay for the week. Tell your parents you're working, tell Matt he can sod off or postpone the engagement for a few days, just stay. Please. I saw the desperation in his gaze. Even if I wanted to say no, I couldn't, not while he's looking at me like that. There was no denying that he's handsome and somewhat charming. And I might regret admitting it later, but I definitely felt drawn to him. It was hard to describe, like he's a magnet, and I'm the needle in a haystack he's been searching for. My common sense, however, kept me from throwing myself at him like some emotionally confused teenager who reads Twilight and who probably has a shrine dedicated to Jacob Black in her room. I'm dating Matt, I have to remember that. Just because I turned out to be a werewolf's mate doesn't mean I'm just going to forget everything and dump my boyfriend and soon-to-be fiancé. But this could be a way to prove my father wrong. I shrugged internally. The little voice had a point. Even if only for once, I would like to hear him tell me he's proud of me. This was my chance to show him I'm responsible and willing to work to earn my place in the world. This could either be the best or worst decision I'll ever make in my life, but I made up my mind. Prying Rian's fingers off my mouth, I nodded. Deal. But only for a week. He visibly relaxed and released his hold on me. Thank you. I'll inform the travel agency right away. I watched him back out of the room. Only when I heard his footsteps fade down the hall did it dawn on me what I did. Holy crap. I threw a werewolf with flour. Don't let the story end. Subscribe to continue our wolf pack legend.